2024 has been a big year, from a presidential election to blockbuster hits, an Oasis reunion and many, many memes that took the internet by storm. But at the end of the year, it's also important to reflect on those who passed away, big names in Hollywood and beyond that we say goodbye to in 2024. Joining me today is Virgin Radio's very own Steve Denyer to talk me through the most shocking celebrity deaths of 2024. But before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe to the Virgin Radio YouTube page. Steve, this was a year that we honestly felt like there's so many names had passed away in the year of 2024, which we knew was going to be a big year, politically to start off with, but culturally, we're making so many movies and TV shows. It seems that COVID-19 is far in the past when everything took a standstill, but we're going to go through chronological order here. We had an icon, Glynis Johns, who died at 100 years old. She was one of the last surviving members of Hollywood's golden age. Can you walk me through her legacy?
Just an incredible legacy. I've been counting. I mean, literally 60 films.
Yeah.
30 plays. She was nominated for every single big award out there. She managed to get a Tony Award. Her first role, she was just 3 weeks old when her mother carried her on stage at a packed-out theatre. She was most famous for, I think, if you're around kind of my age, just go with 40, Mary Poppins.
Yes.
You know, she played Winifred, the suffragette mother, and that role in itself, you and I were speaking about this, was so ahead of its time. That movie came out kind of early 60s, but she could do it all, and that one role in Mary Poppins proved that she could sing, she had presence, she could act, she had tons of personality. If I could recommend one clip to watch of her, it's her doing Send in the Clowns.
Oh.
Because she had this beautiful husky voice, and apparently Stephen Sondheim saw that and created a role just for her.
Well, it is the husky voice that she was most known for. Anytime you can Google her name, it is the voice. But we actually do have a clip of Mary Poppins. Here is Glynis Johns as the suffragette mother.
Oh, Ellen, when you have a second.
Votes for women, step in time! Votes for women, step in time!
Oh, no, really, not at the moment.
Votes for women!
Votes for women!
And it's a role that I forgot about. I forgot that, as you said, it was so ahead of the times to have someone who actually is such a kind of outspoken and powerful woman to be playing a feminist in a 1960s film.
Yeah, that film, I mean, just that little bit alone, but the whole premise of it, it's amazing watching Mary Poppins now as an adult, because you pick up so much more. And I think socially and culturally, it is still more important than ever before when you watch some of the messages that film has. It was way ahead of its time.
Yeah.
It goes down as Disney's probably finest moment. Certainly, it won the most amount of accolades, and we've all grown up with those characters in that movie, and she was a huge part of that.
Oh, 100%. And it seemed like from this massive career that she really was married to the arts. And she said that her father had given her some advice early into her acting career at the age of 12. He said, always listen to your cue. That is good advice both on stage and in life. Listen to your cue and then act on it. And she's been married 4 times. Well, she was married 4 times. And she was quite funny about it because she summed up her marital history saying, for me, most relationships with men have been like pregnancies. They last about 9 months.
Isn't that brilliant? Isn't that
just
great?
From a woman from that kind of time, when you were, shunned for being married for four times, or shunned for being putting your career first, and she's just outspoken.
I think really her career was the most important thing to her. She met lots of people on the way, but she always said, her work on the stage and on screen was the thing that gave her the most amount of happiness. And I think she concentrated on that. And there were, people that came into her life for 9 months.
9 months
The
or
odd
less.
occasion, yeah. But yeah, she was an absolute legend. And to reach that grand age as well, and to have that legacy, you know, we're going to say that lots in this program. They don't make them like that anymore.
No.
She's incredible.
And it is so nice to see like members of Hollywood or big names make it to the 100, as we know. But she died in January, and we're moving on to February now, where Carl Weathers died. He died at the age of 76, which is actually quite a common age in this program. Quite a few of the people that died in 2024 died at the age of 76. Well, we'll keep going now. This is the actor who's best known for starring in the Rocky films. And he actually started off his life as a football player and then an American football player, but then he actually got into the NFL.
Yeah, incredible story, this. He was a really, really great sportsman from school, college. As you say, he made it professionally. But on the side of that, he loved acting. He showed an interest, and he was used as a kind of extra in a couple of TV programs on movie sets. And that seemed to, you know, people just kind of noticed his desire and his love, and the fact that he had, you know, a very kind of athletic physique and an interest in sports. He kind of went into that direction, playing athletes in movies and TV shows.
Well, we've got a clip here of Carl Weathers in, I think this is Rocky 3. And
Amazing.
you can see what an athlete he is.
He's hooking. He's hooking. Damn, Ron, come on! What's the matter with you?
Tomorrow. Let's do it tomorrow.
There is no tomorrow.
It's amazing, isn't it? It fascinating that he had a very rocky, no pun intended, relationship with Sly Stallone.
Did he? In the film or in real life?
In real life.
Oh.
So his very role in the first Rocky movie came about because he was criticising Sly Stallone's acting. So basically, Sly was like, well, you come and do it. And they kind of created this role for him. And it was very up and down right to the end of Rocky V. In Rocky V, they wanted to use clips of him from the previous Rocky movies, even though his character had been killed off by
That's
that stage.
right.
And he was like, no, I'm not having it, because they fell out and there was problems. They couldn't use those clips.
Because they were sort of enemies in the Rocky films, but then he ends up coaching Sylvester Stallone's Rocky character.
Yeah.
In, I think the third or fourth film, which we see from
That was the
clip.
big movie of,
Yeah.
of the series.
And
yeah.
it is insane that, you know, he's gone from an NFL player to playing Apollo Creed, who is one of the biggest names in franchise movies that went forward. And then, of course, the Creed movies came forward years later, where we had Michael B. Jordan playing his illegitimate son, Creed. So it just goes to show that his kind of legacy really did go on for a number of years.
Yeah, and he knew what he was capable of, and everybody knew why they loved him. I mean, if you could to criticise him, you could say he kind of played himself.
Yeah.
You know, he was this big kind of macho sports person and never really went into anything else other than playing that kind of, you know, athletic figure. But, I mean, if you're going to do something, you stay in your lane. And he managed to do that. And all these years later, you know, when you see him or you hear him, you go Rocky. And many people would die to have that kind of
And it's one of
legacy.
those franchises that is met with such enthusiasm. You know, it's not like a controversial, or some people hate it, some people love it. Everyone loves the Rocky films. And, you know, he's just one of those examples of someone who, I think it's quite funny how quite a number of actors actually have started off as athletes or training to be athletes and have switched into acting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that the dedication and the devotion and the fact that you kind of have to make it your life when you're an award-winning sports person kind of crosses over into the acting world as well. Like
You have to be able to take rejection.
Absolutely. It's really cutthroat. It's dog eat dog. Only the toughest manage to actually do, you know, to kind of get a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, which is what he has managed to do. I was in Los Angeles last week. I saw his star.
Oh, wow.
And lots of people were taking pictures of his star. So I thought, what a great legacy. Bearing in mind, we lost him this year.
Exactly.
But his movies, his work, his art, his sports carry on.
Starsky and Hutch, she was also in Happy Gilmore, which is, I think they've just finished filming the second one. I mean, it was in the late 90s, I think the first one was filmed, which was an iconic movie, and he was in that. And it's just sad that the second one will come out and he won't be in it.
Exactly.
He ended up dying of cardiovascular disease, which is obviously quite horrible. And 76 is not old.
No, it's shockingly young, really, when you think of it. Like you say,
Yeah.
so many of these people we're discussing died younger than you would expect. But, you know, maybe over the years, we're very kind of finely tuned now about eating and, you know, living our lives in healthy ways. Some of these old stars live the Hollywood life.
Yeah.
You know, they probably
Especially
did
in that kind of time.
in that climate. So maybe that's something to do
Well,
with it.
Glynis John, she, from the golden age of Hollywood, clearly did something right to be living to 100 when, you know, smoking was like drinking water in the 30s and 40s. We're moving on to someone, and I want to preface that we haven't included absolutely every celebrity that died in 2024 because that would be impossible. But O.J. Simpson is someone that I wanted to bring to the program because if we're going to, you know, discuss shocking deaths, I think that he should be in here, even if he's a controversial figure for what's gone on in his life. But he died, I think, also at the age of 76. He ended up dying of cancer, but it was quite a shocking death, Steve, because he only announced early last year that he had been diagnosed with cancer, and then less than a year, a little bit over a year later, he had died from prostate cancer.
Yes, and I think in America, people have grown up with him. He signified the all-American man, the sport. I mean, this is before the controversy,
Of course.
and you know the crimes and the court case, and you know everything everybody said about him. He was the American dream, you know, and people grew up, kids wanted to be him, fathers looked at him and they also kind of thought, you know, he is what a man, a traditional man should be like. So he was such a part in so many people's lives. And to hear that he was ill and to hear that he passed away shocked a lot of people. People still remember those shocking scenes in the 90s, you know, the car chase.
Well, I was about to play a clip of the car chase actually, but I ended up getting another one because this is obviously from the 1994 trial, murder trial for O.J. Simpson. This clip here is when he tries on the infamous glove to see if the gloves that were left at the crime scene fit him.
So dramatic, isn't
So
it?
dramatic.
The Ryan Murphy series about
What did you
him.
think about that?
I thought it was incredible.
So
It was
did I.
an incredible watch. Bearing in mind, most of us over here didn't really know the full facts about
Of
the
course.
case, you know, and we hadn't grown up with him. But if you really want the definitive story and the ins and outs and, you know, whether he was guilty or not, look at it. I mean, America was torn on this. I think a lot of people thought he did.
And it's one of those things where it's like the jury found him not guilty. They acquitted him of this murder, and you kind of just say, well, I'm not a judge nor a juror, so I'm going to go off. I just have to accept what it was. But of course, Nicole Brown Simpson and Daniel Goldman? Don Goldman.
Ronald Goldman.
Yes, Ronald Goldman. Their families obviously always maintained that he did commit the murder. He was the murders, I should say. He was acquitted and went off and did his thing, but ended up basically robbing a store, and he ended up going into jail for about 9 years.
Yeah, he was kind of like a lovable rogue. Like I say, people had so much love for him before his life turned bad that almost some people forgave him. I heard people recently liken him to a kind of Donald Trump figure. You know, there's so much kind of love and hate for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And people, you know, he was very controversial. Interesting, in his death, he was as controversial as
absolutely.
his life. Like the NFL, for example, refused to even put out a statement.
And that would have actually severely upset him.
Yeah,
if having them
that
turn
would have
their
been
backs on him.
devastating.
But it is important for people to understand that O.J. Simpson was found most likely to have killed them in the civil trial. Yeah. He was just found not guilty in the criminal trial, but when the civil trial came out not long later, he was found to be, when you say guilty, it's more that he was most likely to be the culprit.
Yeah.
and you don't get sentenced or committed for anything like that. But it is just there was a court case.
He had money. He had the best legal team, the best advisors. Many people would say he was just lucky. He just got lucky. There was a sports analyst who said he was one of the greatest athletes, but it pales into comparison to him being perceived as a double murderer.
Yeah.
So things changed from the 90s. He never recovered from that. He continues. His life got crazy.
Yeah, and you're right. When he did die, you had people coming out and just tweeting saying, I know Caitlyn Jenner tweeting good riddance.
And it's interesting you mentioned Caitlyn Jenner. The Kardashians played such a role. So if you watch this Ryan Murphy series, you can see, Kim as a kid and the father getting involved in the court case.
Which people thought was just hilarious.
Yeah.
People thought it was like such a Ryan Murphy move to be capitalising on the fact that the Kardashians just had links to this. Obviously, their father, Robert Kardashian Sr., was a lawyer on his team.
Yeah.
Was good friends with OJ.
Such a great Hollywood LA story, isn't it?
Well, even more insane that Chris and Robert Kardashian Sr. had divorced by that point, but very divisive for Chris to be having been best friends with Nicole and being on that side with her family, and then seeing her ex-husband representing him. Yeah. It just, I don't know how that isn't spoken enough, but we'll move on to June 2024. Donald Sutherland died from a pulmonary disease. He died at the age of 88, which I still think is quite young. Now, we remember him because he's had a long-standing career.
Amazing.
He has been around for ages. He was best known for MASH.
Yep.
He did Pride and Prejudice. I loved him in Fool's Gold.
Yes.
He played the father in that. Space Cowboys, Don't Look Now. And we have to acknowledge that he's the father of Kiefer Sutherland.
Yes, of course. Well, actually, I would say he was the ultimate father of America. He always seemed fatherly. He always seemed old, I thought, in every... But he had gravitas. It was the looks, it was the voice.
I loved his voice.
You always believed in the role. It's a bit like Tom Hanks. Whichever movie Tom Hanks is in, you just believe the role. You know it's Tom Hanks, but you totally believe the work that he's doing in the character he's portraying. And Donald Sutherland had that in droves. I don't think many people know what an incredible sense of humour he had. He
started off doing more comedy, right?
Yeah, and he was a really funny guy. If you read his book, and there's some great clips, he was on the Graham Norton show, and he spent 3 minutes talking about farting.
Oh, my God.
And it was very funny.
I always find that Graham Norton brings out like the humour in some of the dullest celebrities. Not that Donald is, but look, we have a clip here for anyone who doesn't recognise Donald Sutherland. Here he is as President Snow in the Hunger Games.
Don't make no mistake. She intends to take my place now. But I've been watching you. And you watching me. I'm afraid we've both been played for fools.
That sends shivers down my spine. Because
and that's the thing, he could be scary, but in another movie, a couple of months later, looked like the kindest, caring...
Agreed. Grandfather, like Santa Claus figure.
Just amazing, isn't it? I mean, he's one in a million. He actually won an honorary Oscar for his contributions to cinema, I think, a few years ago, like in 2017, because he's given us so much, and the Academy wanted to, recognise that fact.
But I was reading up about his career, and he had a really tough start to the acting world. He really couldn't make it work for a number of years. Because he's Canadian, him and his wife moved to LA, dirt broke, something like that. It took him ages and ages to get a role. He finally got a small role. It catapulted him into a few others. But I loved this fact. This made me laugh so much, and I would hate it if it were me, but I still think when you're rich and famous, it doesn't matter. He was obviously in Animal House, which was one of the biggest comedies of the time. It was obviously about the fraternity in the US that the dean was trying to get them kicked out. It was one of my dad's favourite movies, and he was in it. It was kind of like an unknown film, so they didn't get many people who had big names in it. By that point, Donald Sutherland actually did have somewhat of a name, and they thought that he was like the big get that they're getting. Anyway, he was offered a certain amount of money. He was offered look, you can either get 2% of the overall makings that the film makes, or we can pay you $35,000 up front. And this is back in the 80s, I think. Anyway, the film went on to make $141 million worldwide, and it was a $3 million budget. If he had done, so he gets $35,000 for starring in this movie. If he went with the 2%, he would have made $14 million. The film had made $141 million whenever it was. That was probably the 80s. But that is $658 million in today's money.
Gosh.
Could you imagine? Apparently he spoke about it quite a lot. He was just like, that was the worst mistake of my life.
He's a really great example of somebody, like you say, he did have many, many rejections. I found it really tough to break through. But what he said after he did become famous is they really mattered, those rejections, because they spurned him on.
Yeah.
And so we have so many people coming in to us at Virgin Radio, megastars, people who are at the top of their game, and they all have that in common. And they all say, even though it doesn't feel like it at the time, the rejections are a learning process to learn from. And, you know, every knock makes you tougher. And that's very much the case with Donald Sutherland, who's left us with a great legacy of work. Every decade.
Decades and decades.
He managed to come back with an iconic character or a blockbuster movie. You know, many people would hope for just one of those roles in their lifetime, but he gave us a plethora.
And a son to live on with your legacy. And a fun fact about this, it was completely random off topic, but it just shows that, you know, you do inherit talent from your, you know, family. It's not all just learning on the job. I was watching one of my favourite TV shows is The Newsroom, HBO's The Newsroom.
Brilliant.
There's one scene in season 3, I think, where there's an actress, actress playing a college girl, and she's talking about how she had been sexually assaulted and how she wanted to create this forum where she would basically publicly out alleged sex offenders. Anyway, I was thinking, wow, this actress is amazing. Like, she was a standout, and it's only a very small part of the episode. I Google her. It's Kiefer Sutherland's daughter.
No way.
Donald Sutherland's granddaughter.
That's amazing.
Isn't that insane?
Yeah.
It was just...
What a talented family. I mean, one of my favourite shows is 24.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, Kiefer Sutherland, you know, you couldn't imagine anybody else taking on that role.
Yeah.
That was him. It was him through and through. You know, we have our favourite scenes, expressions. It's just so legendary. So very much, like you said, what a talented family.
Absolutely. Well, Steve, we'll move on to July now, where Shannon Doherty, kind of an American 80s, or 90s, I should say, 90s icon. She died at the age of 53, very young. And she seemed like she was given a very tough card. She had spent the better part of 25 years, since around 1999, with certain illnesses. Now, she said publicly in 1999 that she was diagnosed with Crohn's, and then 15 years later, she had stage 3 breast cancer, went to remission, then 2020 it returned. 2023, she said that it had spread to her brain, but then she was doing some sort of successful trial. But then by July 2024, she had tragically passed away. And I just felt she had kept a pretty constant career going throughout all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of feel that she's one of those people that we grew up with the awful news. And every couple of years you thought, oh, maybe she's doing better. You know, like she announced she was in remission, and then you get bad news as well. But, you know, to give her due, like you say, she kept on going.
Yeah.
And she always had, especially kind of 90210 era, she had that reputation of...
bit of a ball buster.
Yeah. Like a force of nature. Somebody that you wouldn't want to mess around with. You know, somebody who would tell you exactly. And some people said that she was difficult. Other people loved the fact that, you know, you knew where you were. But incredibly tough lady. She really went through the mill with her health. But she was always honest. She was always forward-facing. And you can't help but feel that she probably helped millions of people who were struggling with their own health conditions.
And I think what a successful career when you land 2 massive TV shows. She was in Beverly Hills 90210, which went for 10 years, and then she was in Charmed. Now, these are 2 massive TV shows that meant a lot to a lot of people across different generations. Obviously, it started in the 90s and then it went into the 2000s. So she was clearly quite well liked within the entertainment industry if she's bagging this many roles, especially when she's so unwell.
Yeah, yeah. She always maintained the bad girl of Hollywood image, which is brilliant, isn't it? And like we say, you know, in the 90s, before we had box sets, before we kind of properly binge stuff, we would watch Beverly Hills, and that would be an appointment to view stuff. And we don't really have that anymore.
No.
You know, where millions and millions of people tune in to the same thing, and we
Yeah.
all talk about it and stuff, but we all
binge
watch it at the
stuff
same
now.
time. We do, and we all do it at different paces and stuff.
Yeah.
So you don't quite have, but she represented that kind of golden age, if you like.
I
just
remember
before.
even when I was in high school, and I'm a little bit later than Beverly Hills 90210. When I was in high school, 90210, the reboot, came out, which I absolutely loved. But Beverly Hills 90210 would still be on the TV, as you said. It would be on you just be watching it in the box office, kind of, or on the daily Fox channel, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I loved it because it was never so far. It was the 90s, you know?
Yeah.
Kind of the best era for teenage rom-coms. But
Really was. They gave us... The other thing is, it's so shocking to think of her as an ill person because she's so ballsy and gutsy and in your face in all of her roles.
Yeah.
And if you watch her interviews as well. So she did an incredible job of just kind of overcoming the odds, I think. But a really, really sad legacy, and unfortunately some people have the worst luck in the world when it comes to their health. But I do think she did a lot of good by being honest and by giving great health advice to
and
other
just
people.
by being herself the whole way through.
Yeah.
Staying in July, actually, Richard Simmons, who we're about to speak about, he died on the exact same day as Shannon Doherty. This is Richard Simmons, who he's a face that I think everyone would recognise, whether you were a fan or not.
Yeah.
This former fitness instructor and television personality, he was the man in front of those big live fitness 80s, you know, high-waisted pants, the whole lot, the lycra, the big socks.
Yeah.
You know, he was the one that was running all of those fitness workouts, kind of like the male Jane Fonda, some could say.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he unfortunately died. It said natural causes. He supposedly could have suffered a heart attack in his sleep. And he was 78 years old.
Yeah.
But he had a legacy, Steve. He was kind of one of the biggest names in that heyday of this celebrity fitness.
Yeah, he was probably the first. So if you look at, you know, within our lifetime, we've had the likes of Mr. Motivator over here and the Green Goddess in the 80s and stuff, but it all pretty much started with him in America. And what he did is he told people of all shapes and sizes, it's important to exercise. You can enjoy exercise. You don't necessarily have to be that great at it, but do it with me.
And do it at home.
And do it at home. And there was never any stigma. He was one of the great, just reading up about his life, he was great with his fans. He made sure that he wrote personal replies to every single...
Wow.
And he used to get thousands of these a month, but he would sit down when he wasn't exercising in his leotards and reply to all of these.
He did seem busy.
He did seem really busy. The other great thing about him is he never took himself seriously, and he was always parodied in, you know, like Saturday Night Live and other shows because of the look and because of the lycra.
Because he kept that look going for decades and decades. He remained that, you know, big hair and those hilarious outfits, and he just was who he was. And I think he kind of, his legacy is actually just inspiring people to, you know, exercise, but I guess be yourself.
Yeah, and people really warmed to him because he was himself. And, you know, you kind of felt like you knew him, that you would like to hang out with him, that he was fun, that he was on your side as well.
Yeah.
And remember, you know, America has a huge obesity problem. And back in the 70s and 80s, they didn't have stuff like, you know, fitness DVDs and what have you.
No.
And online tutorials on YouTube. So he was that one person. And also he was the only person doing it. And he was the first person.
And that's insane to me, to be that first person in that kind of wave that came about, because even in today's, well, even like maybe 10 years ago, the at-home online fitness regimes, ended up becoming multi-million-dollar companies. You know, Kayla Itsines is a prime example of that, who created a fitness app. Steph Claire Smith, same. These are two Australian women. They have made so much money from making really easy at-home workouts that you can pay a subscription to.
Yeah.
And Richard Simmons, he's the OG. He's the one doing this.
Yes. Yeah, I can't. And the other funny thing is I always think how many people poured something, injured something at home, trying to keep up with these routines. There was no kind of disclaimer about, you know, be careful. Some of those routines, if you look at them on YouTube, they're hilarious because of what he's wearing, but they're quite busy.
Yeah, I was watching saying, I
energetic.
I actually don't know if I could do this. I'm not that flexible. Well, speaking of Saturday Night Live, you mentioned this before, but we're going to speak about Bob Newhart. Now, this is another person that lasted quite a long time in the scheme of how long we get on this life. He died at the age of 94. Now, he was a very well-known American comedian and actor. He was in The Big Bang Theory. He had his own show, The Bob Newhart Show. He was an elf. Newhart, the show, he was so popular for his deadpan comedy. I've got a clip here of him hosting Saturday Night Live in the 80s.
Thank you, Ray. It's great being back and hosting Saturday Night Live for the second time. I hosted 15 years ago in 1980 and apparently made such an impression on them. They said, boy, we got to have this guy back as soon as possible.
Well, that was the 90s. You got me wrong there, but he had a 70-year career, Steve.
Yeah.
What was his legacy?
Nobody else had seen anything like that, I don't think. He was one of these amazing comedians who could do these kind of monologue comedy sketches that he always made it look like it was completely off the cuff. But serious amounts of work went into that. And, you know, there's some great examples of his work on YouTube. I think it's fair to say he probably spurned on a generation of other comedians. It's deadpan, it's relatable. He kind of plays it as like a dinner guest. Absurd situations, completely deadpan, and being very, very serious, although you're kind of laughing with him about what he's saying. But you should look, there's a great bus sketch, a sketch about being a bus driver on YouTube, and I was howling. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
I love it when comedy kind of stands the test of time in that sense that it's generationally funny. People don't, you know, there's no ifs and buts, there's no joke, there's no carrying on about wokeness, carrying on about just stupid stuff. It's just clear comedy that everyone wants to watch and it doesn't need to have anything else behind it.
It's so true. I was just about to say there's absolutely no swearing.
Yeah.
There's no sexual references. There's nothing edgy. You can imagine a whole family sitting in front of the TV looking at him, kids, parents, grandparents laughing. And he just makes it look so effortless. And remember, nobody had seen this before. It's almost like a kind of Alan Bennett type thing. It's just him, his reactions, his pauses, his intonation is so clever. And when you see his work, you'll work out who's kind of used bits of that, you know, later
because that
on.
is comedy, right?
Yeah,
you always take inspiration from the generations before you, but Steve, Gina Rowlands, she died in August this year, August 14. She died of suffering from Alzheimer's. Her family had come out a few years ago saying that she'd been suffering with it for a few years. And so many people were, you know, a bit gobsmacked because her famous character in The Notebook, obviously she plays the older version of Ali, also died of Alzheimer's. I have a clip here and you'll all recognise it because who hasn't watched The Notebook, of Gina Rowlands playing this iconic character.
Good night.
Good night. I'll be seeing you.
Wow.
It's like still makes
Just
me
amazing.
cry.
Just seeing that all those years later takes me back to.
It was 2004, but it just feels like it was yesterday.
It's one of those films that affects you so much. You remember, the cinema that you were in, what was going on, who you were going out with. It's one of those kind of pivotal films, I think. And I hadn't seen the whole kind of Alzheimer's illness being played out before. Really, until I saw her in that movie. And life tends to create some awful scenarios. And who would have thought that she would have gone on and passed away from that?
And Steve, because I'm only kind of she's only come into my kind of orbit when she was in The Notebook in a more elderly role, but I didn't realise that she had a very successful 7-decade-long career. She died at the age of 94. She had a big innings, and she had done multiple movies and projects over her life. I didn't realise that she'd been so successful. And in an interview with T Magazine in 2016, she said, the one thing I never wanted to do was to fall in love or get married or have children. I wanted to act. And she ended up getting married, and she was with him till the day she died. And they had three children together.
Yeah.
But it's some of these women, it's so nice. Her and Glynis John, the same thing, is that they're just so passionate and so motivated in a time where we didn't know that was possible.
It was her whole life. I mean, some incredible stats. 4-time Emmy Award winner, 2-time Golden Globe winner. She started she had a massive kind of career on stage in the theatre in the 50s. People of a certain age remember her appearing with her husband. She appeared in 10 movies.
That's right.
With him. So they became quite a famous kind of double act, on and off the screen. Betty Ford's story, she played Betty Ford. She appeared with Woody Allen. I think for kind of our generation, really, Notebook will be her legacy. We'll remember it. To anyone watching this right now, and if you haven't seen Notebook, watch it because it's beautiful. It's a great romantic story. It's devastating. It's a proper journey. Proper journey. What a great
It's
film.
one of the best romances of all time. But Steve, James Earl Jones, he passed away in September this year. Now, he died at the age of 93. He died from type 2 diabetes. He was a very successful actor and voice actor. He received an EGOT, which is obviously an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar and a Tony, which is far and few between to find people with those. It's very hard to be getting one of those. But he was most known for his voice, his deep voice that so many people would love. He's the kind of guy that you would have said, I want him to narrate my life.
Yeah.
He had the most beautiful voice. Look, I've got a clip here of him in Field of Dreams, the movie from, I think it must have been in the 90s with Kevin Costner.
The one constant through all the years, Ray, has been baseball. America has rolled by like an army of steamrollers. It's been erased like a blackboard, rebuilt and erased again. But baseball has marked the time.
Wow. He always seemed the kind of guy that you would like to hang out with. Somebody who would take you under his wing. He just seemed like such a kind of nice, kind, compassionate, talented man. As a radio presenter, I'd die for that voice. I sound like Minnie Mouse in comparison with him. The great thing about him is he overcame a massive stuttering problem when he was growing up. So that's quite incredible to think about, his legacy of work when he started life with such a stuttering issue that for many people, it would have prevented them back then getting into the entertainment industry. But Darth Vader alone.
Being the voice of Darth Vader, like, what a legacy. And also, Steve, being the voice of Mufasa.
Yes, yeah. And also, can I add another one?
What?
He was the voice of CNN.
That one really
Which is amazing, isn't it?
For like 20 years or
20 years. So whenever there was like a breaking news alert or, they come off the back of an ad break, this is CNN, that was him.
Clearly people were understanding that this beautiful voice, his voice, I think Morgan Freeman, obviously, and actually, rest in peace to this one, but Philip Seymour Hoffman, I loved his voice.
Yeah.
Absolutely loved it. But what I loved about when he got the role of Darth Vader, this is what George Lucas, the director of Star Wars, he said he hadn't cast Darth Vader. He said he wanted someone with a deep voice like Orson Welles, which is how he got the role.
Yeah.
He got the role off his voice before anything else.
Isn't that amazing? It's so amazing. He was a massive, massively recognised voice. He was in a massive advert in America for the Bell Atlantic telephone systems for years and years and years.
Wow.
And he was one of the most recalled voices. As soon as he started talking that voice, you'd be like, that's him.
I just think, as you said, the stuttering, imagine being him and knowing that this insecurity that you had as a kid, your voice ended up being the thing that you're most known for because people loved it so much.
Maybe that's what made him, the fact that he concentrated so much on how he sounded. I think he will go down in history as one of the best voices in the entertainment industry, and also possibly as America's grandfather and as a black man when there weren't that many people of colour in the entertainment industry.
Absolutely.
Somebody who paved the way for so many other people. But yeah, like you say, Mufasa, Darth Vader, CNN.
What a
rich tapestry.
What a rich tapestry. Steve, this is probably one of the most shocking deaths in my eyes. Maggie Smith died in September at the age of 89. Now, she had a large career stretching from comedy to drama, from stage to movies, but the one that she would be best known for people, a majority of people would be obviously playing Professor McGonagall in Harry Potter, and now I have a clip from one of her most iconic scenes.
Hogwarts is threatened. Man the boundaries, protect us, do your duty to our school. I've always wanted to use that spell.
That's one of my favourite lines.
Same.
She's so funny, and she kind of mastered the whole camp, the art of the camp aside.
100%.
What a legacy. I think that as far as people her age, she was the one that I was most upset about.
I think so.
I was in London's West End when they turned all the theatres dark for a minute, and everybody just kind of froze on the pavement the evening after she passed away. And I thought to myself, not many people would command this kind of tribute.
And because she loved theatre, I've got a few quotes from her. She said, "I'm deeply grateful for the work in Harry Potter and indeed Downton Abbey, but it wasn't what you'd call satisfying. I didn't really feel like I was acting in those things. I wanted to get back to the stage so much because theatre is basically my favourite medium." She said that her and Alec Rickman, who played Snape, who obviously also passed away a few years ago, they used to chatter out about the fact that they had this mutual feeling that their work in Harry Potter was nothing more than a series of reaction shots.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't be downplaying their acting in those movies as much as they did, but, self-deprecation is obviously enjoyed in England and in Australia, I would say. But I still think that she's one of the most talented actors in the franchise. But, Steve, she said that she wasn't even properly going to even be an actress because her mum told her that, she doubted that she'd be a successful actress with a face like that.
Isn't that amazing?
Isn't that amazing?
And that face is just so synonymous with so many great roles. I've never seen her in anything that I would call bad. You mentioned Downton Abbey, so she hated that. I mean, she was in it. It was a great success, but she said that was the moment that people started bothering her on the streets, and she didn't want to be bothered going to buy a pint of milk or whatever,
Fair enough.
or heading down to the theatre and people bombarding her with autographs. I think, like you said, she loved being in the theatre, treading the boards, learning her art. And she loved that feeling of being live on stage night after night after night, and that genuine laugh that comes back to you. Of course it would be, and it's not the same being on a movie set with Harry Potter
for months
and
months at a time as well, because I think they filmed for 9 months of a year.
Yeah, she was in so much. If I may, one of my favourite moments, and nobody ever talks about, is, and I always get the name wrong, I think it's called The Best, Most Exotic Marigold Hotel, where the bunch of pensioners go to India, and Dev Patel is in this movie, and she plays a kind of very crotchety bad-mouthed pensioner, but very, very camp,
Wow.
very funny, and it's a great example of what Maggie Smith did and what she did best.
Yeah, and she could do it all. You and I have spoken about this, Steve, but this was a shocking death this year. Liam Payne dying in the middle of October from, a concoction of drugs found in his system, but then of kind of fainting, falling over a balcony on the third floor in a hotel in Argentina, and he died instantly. From what we know, that the autopsy was released about a month later, and it was a tragic story. Just 31 years old, a budding musician, a well-known artist after years of being in One Direction, one of the most popular boy bands for over a decade across the world, actually. This one really hit home.
Yeah, this is the most tragic death of the year. This sent shockwaves around the world. Just seeing that breaking news alert, you had to kind of double take. And the facts, as you put them, are so shocking. It's just hard to believe that somebody who was so young and on face value had it all, died on his own in a hotel room, reportedly high on drugs. There are so many questions about, and it's such a rare kind of event to happen now. We live in PR-able times.
Oh, God, yeah.
Everything's PR'd and stuff, but this is the most un-PR'd story ever. It's a very much a story of 2024, people having videos of him behaving erratically in the 24 hours leading up to this happening. So many questions are now asked. Duty of care. Why was he in that hotel room alone? Was anyone looking after him when things weren't so good? We know the good stuff, but it's so tragic when you see him, and this was replayed. He was 14 when he first went on the X Factor. Simon Cowell said, "You're not ready. Do your GCSEs. Come back in a couple of years." And of course, he got put into One Direction, age something like 16, 17. He spent more than half of his life in the public eye.
And it kind of started a conversation, well, I guess rebooted a conversation really about how much pressure we put on these young artists as a society, because so many of them die young. So many of them turn to drugs. So many of them turn to partying and blowing their money. And I'm not saying that Liam Payne was frivolous with any of those things, but he had a well-known drug problem and had a tragic death, obviously falling off the balcony. But we can't not take blame for a bit of it, I think. I think that there is this insane pressure for these celebrities that start off so young. And obviously he wanted to make it in the music industry. We know that. But we all have a role to play in letting them be their young selves.
Yeah, but people will argue, he was 31. He'd left One Direction years ago. I think it's really sad with him looking at footage now leading up to his death and interviews that he gave, just how much he struggled. He found it really, really difficult. He found the whole thing of touring the world constantly and being in hotels that were so big. Remember, they were huge in America that he was a worldwide star and couldn't go out in public like you and I could go out in public. And that really, really affected him. Now, some people managed to deal with it. And, they use their money and they put it into real estate and they're clever and stuff. But I think he was really, knowing what we know now, I think he was let down after One Direction stopped. He was said to be the big star of One Direction.
He was the leader, wasn't he?
He was the leader. He had the best vocals. He could do the highs, the lows. He wrote the songs as well. So they kind of said to him, you'll be the big star once this band finishes. Of course, that didn't happen. That was Harry Styles. And it broke my heart to see those boys back together at the funeral, of course, here in the UK.
It was a reunion that no one wanted.
Sad. So sad, so desperately sad. And his mother hugging Simon Cowell, and they're both in tears. It really is. I think it's the most amount of tragedy in any of these deaths.
I agree. I couldn't agree with you more. And it's always so tragic when they're so young and 31, But just finally, our last, big shocking death of the year, Steve, Quincy Jones. He died in early November, at the age of 91. Now, 91 is obviously, he's lived a great life, but, you know, who wants Quincy Jones out of this world after the most insane career of a musician, a record producer, a composer? Quincy, middle name Delight Jones, which I just love that. I love it. Could you imagine that being your middle name? And he was obviously best known for producing so many of Michael Jackson's biggest hits. But I've got a clip here where he's interviewed by Spotify, and he talks about kind of a life lesson that he's learned.
I'm discovering a lot of things about myself, and I'm trying now for the last 2 years to get all of the negative thoughts out of my body. Grudges, no more anger. It's a waste of time.
So
amazing, isn't it?
Another amazing person learning life lessons along the way. But I love his daughter, Rashida Jones, I have to say, from Parks and Recreation. She is just so funny, but he was such an inspiration for the Black community, Steve. Yeah. He was plucked from the poverty line, basically. He said that he basically spent his life in extreme poverty. Him and his brother broke into a recreational centre when they were young kids, and he found a piano and started playing it. And that was it. Yeah. He went from there.
Just incredibly talented. He apparently saw a neighbour playing a piano when he was kind of 6 years old and taught himself. That's the incredible thing about him. He taught himself, and he ended up being a composer, you know, a band leader, this most amazing producer. There's a great documentary on Netflix about the charity song We Are the World.
Of course.
Which is a bit like kind of Band-Aid, Do They Know It's Christmas, but it came out over there. And Quincy Jones is such a big part in that movie. You've got a room full of the biggest egos in show business. Michael Jackson turns up with his chimpanzee Bubbles. All this craziness going on. And Quincy Jones is like the father of this whole kind of project. And you know, you can just tell he's in control. He's beautifully in control. When you look at the legacy, we have to talk about Michael Jackson.
Of course.
He produced Off the Wall. Now, Off the Wall sold 20 million copies. He then went on to do Thriller, which sold 65 million copies. I mean, this is unbelievable stuff. And then did Michael Jackson's Bad album. And I think a lot of people would say that was Michael Jackson at that era. That 10 years was Michael Jackson.
That was his best.
Oh, absolutely. And he could never better that.
And I didn't realise, Steve, I didn't even realise he was a producer of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which is one of my favourite shows of all time. He's had a large career across, you know, a lot of different genres, a lot of different parts of the entertainment industry, and he had a legacy that never went away. He was always a hero to so many.
You know, we've spoken in this last kind of hour or so about people who've been nominated for awards and occasionally won a Grammy or an Oscar. This man won 28 Grammys. And everybody wants to work with him, and everyone who said that they did work with him kind of quote him as making the best lives of, you know, their career, the best chapters of their career. He was one in a million. They don't make them like that anymore.
No, they don't. Oh, Steve, wow, we've really gone through it. There's been so many tragic deaths this year, but so many lives to celebrate as well. So
much inspiration.
So much inspiration and so much talent in the world, it would seem. But that is all from us this week. And thank you to Steve Denyer for joining me. And be sure to like and subscribe for the latest entertainment news here on Virgin Radio's YouTube channel.
Virgin Radio.